We're gabbing with Greenwood. Greenwood Gab.
We're back! We're back! Did you stay tuned? Did you listen to the previous episode so you know what we'll be talking about? Did you want to hear more about murder? Yes. Gabbing with Greenwood about murder.
About murder. All right. So we've got 5 more books apiece to talk about May through September.
Yeah.
Let's transition into our books because I'll just start talking about random movies no one's ever seen.
Okay.
All right. So Natalie has put me in charge of transitions for the second half. I can't promise any of the stellar transitions she made in the first half, but I'll try my best. So May was Virginiana, which Virginiana is just a fancy word that means about Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I chose the book Razorblade Tears by the author S.A. Cosby, who lives in Gloucester, Virginia, which is just down the road from Natalie. She waves at him sometime.
Yeah. From where I grew up.
But Razorblade Tears is a gritty crime novel with murder because we promised murder. We're going to deliver it right at the top. There are 2 guys, a married couple who have been murdered, and their fathers, it's a black father and a white father. They were a mixed race couple, and their fathers are both ex-cons who were not so accepting of their sons when their sons were living, but now with their tragic deaths are reevaluating their relationships with their sons, and they want to get revenge for this brutal murder that has happened, try to figure out who did it and why. So they go into all of their kind of the past relationships that they had that they've been trying to avoid as they've tried to live on the straight and narrow, but they will do anything to find out what happened to their sons and bring some closure to those relationships. And it is very gritty. It's very violent. One of the first scenes I remember reading, he's breaking this guy's fingers and they're like talking about the bones. And I'm just like, oh gosh, this is so much. So it is violent. And I will warn you of that, but it's really well written and an interesting story, a very good read. I would recommend S.A. Cosby to anyone who likes a dark, gritty kind of read.
And I am that type of reader because I also read a book by S.A. Cosby this month. I, first of all, picked S.A. Cosby because he's from my hometown area. I grew up in King and Queen County, Virginia. And while he does not live there, he lives close to there. He owns a funeral home in King and Queen County that I would drive by every day. So it's like, hey, this guy that owns a business in my small town that nobody's heard of is also an author. So yeah, I'm going to read one of his books. So I read All the Sinners Bleed. I listened to the audiobook. And if you're paying attention, we're talking about May. And this book was actually published in June because I'm a time traveler. Now, I, as a librarian, sometimes get advanced copies of books. If you've ever heard of a service called NetGalley, if you're a book blogger or a librarian or a teacher, you can sign up for this service and possibly get some advanced review copies of books. So I was really excited to get the audiobook of this book about this kind of small town. I was going to say murder. A murder happens, but there's a lot more to the story than that. So it starts with this sheriff. So the sheriff is the main character of the book. He gets a call that there is a shooter at the local high school. And when they get there, this former student is holding a teacher at gunpoint. So he's not like there to like do like this mass school shooting. He's really after this one teacher. And it's like a teacher that everybody really loved. Like he was a mentor to a lot of students. And so they're like, well, why is this student going after this particular teacher? But then it unfolds that maybe this teacher wasn't that good of a person. And it brings up this whole like backstory of all these cold cases that hadn't been solved. So while that's the beginning of the book, it's only the beginning. Like there's a lot more to the story. And then it goes into kind of the personal life of the sheriff and things that he's going through in this small town. It was really interesting reading this author because I like the content, the kind of gritty violence, as Sarah said, but also he's from where I'm from.
I will say our next month is out of your comfort zone. And I think with this one, you were definitely in your comfort zone. You're reading about a place that is based on an area you're really familiar with. You're reading a genre that's one of your go-to genres. So now we have to transition out of that, right?
I will say, though, with All the Sinners Bleed, I kind of became like an influencer with our group because a lot of our other Southside Reads group members read All the Sinners Bleed for Out of Your Comfort Zone the next month. People listen to my book recommendations.
And also kind of related to mine, I thought about Out of Your Comfort Zone because I do read fairly widely. And so when I was thinking about what is out of my comfort zone when it comes to reading, what I decided to do instead, because we like to make our themes, malleable to people's interests, and you can kind of define them however you want. And I thought about, as being somebody who grew up in the South, of what is a comfortable place for me. And, S.A. Cosby is writing in this rural South that is not always comfortable for his characters. And so I read a book called A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South. It was edited by Sanel Barnes, who I actually bought this book because I went and heard her speak. It's a collection of essays that kind of tackle the question of who is welcome, specifically in the American South of the 21st century. So, out of your comfort zone, when you're thinking of comfort, you're thinking of belonging and welcoming. It uplifts the incredible diversity that we have in the South, looking at issues like sex and gender, family, immigration. There's even one story about a woman who moves to Indiana and she's lamenting the things she misses about the South. It was an interesting kind of reflection on where I'm from and how that is a different place depending on who you are and how you got here.
I guess kind of speaking of belonging and diversity, for this month, I read We Are Not Yet Equal, Understanding Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson. So this book is the young adult version of the book White Rage. It was uncomfortable to read as a white person. I knew a lot of the information that was being presented, but having it all in one book all together was powerful to read. So it's about the civil rights movement and going forward in time and how some things are changing, but mostly not. And it does talk about, speaking of like the place where you're from, it mentions Prince Edward County and the school closings in one of the chapters. It's a teen version talking about all of these historical moments on how we're still not totally equal.
We both went deep nonfiction as we thought about what was out of our comfort zone. But then the next month, we maybe dove back into our comfort zone because the next month was That's My Job. I did not read a book about a librarian because that might have been a little too on the nose for me. But instead, I read a book called The Woman in the Library. As a librarian, that is a woman. That's sort of who I am. I am a woman in the library. And that book was written by Solari Gentile. And it's interesting. I think it probably would have worked for books about books too, because it is about multiple layers. So there is this mystery story about these 4 people who just happen to be sitting at the same study table in the Boston Public Library's reading room, and they hear a woman scream and someone has died. And they're trying to figure out who it could have been. So they create this group of people, of these 4 strangers that now are interested in this thing that has happened and how it has affected their lives. But this is actually just a novel that a woman is writing. So you like open with this story and it's actually this woman writing this novel about these people who are experiencing this thing. And she's Australian and the author herself is actually Australian. And she has this guy who has offered to read her manuscript and give her suggestions. So things like you use the term jumper for sweater. And in the United States, we would say sweater. Or I live in Boston, so I know there's this really great coffee shop right across from the Boston Public Library. So you might have them go there to talk when the police, are removing people from the library or whatever. So he's giving her these little suggestions as they're writing back and forth. So you have this novel that she's writing that is this mystery story. And then you have this conversation going back and forth between the author and this guy who is her fan, who is giving her suggestions. And it gets really creepy and weird. So you have this kind of mystery story going on at both levels. Who is who and what is what and how is this all fitting together? It's a little meta. It was a fun read though.
So I thought I was cheating the theme with this book, although it does talk about books and delivering books to people. So it's kind of got the library part of my job. But I chose this book, Angel of Greenwood by Randy Pink, and I picked it because it had Greenwood in the title and we're Greenwood Library. However, this book was not named for Janet D. Greenwood. It was named for Greenwood, Oklahoma. And this book is set in 1921 in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if you know history, it's actually about the Tulsa race massacres. So when you were like, maybe we were more in our comfort zone because these books are about our jobs. Not really. So it's about a girl named Angel of Greenwood, who lives in the Greenwood area of Tulsa. And she is kind of a loner, and it's talking about her life leading up to the race massacre. And her English teacher, I'm assuming English because of books, builds this bike that has a cart attached to it with books on it so that she can, ride the bike to these other neighborhoods, because Greenwood is more of like a richer, kind of well-to-do neighborhood. And they're going to take books to other neighborhoods of kids that maybe don't have access to books. So there's that's my job piece of it. But then it leads up into this massacre. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say.
You read a book that was set a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? August's theme was
it a long time ago?
It was a long time ago. And I read a book called Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. So going back to the horror and murder and
back into our comfort zone.
our normal places. This is a story of a daughter of a rancher in 1840s northern Mexico. Her name is Magdalena, but they call her Nena. And she is living in a time period of great transition in this part of Mexico, Texas area. There was a big Mexican-American war you might have heard of in the history class. Her family is being threatened by these Anglo settlers who are trying to take land from the Mexican people who have lived and worked this land for generations. But also, as the title would suggest, of the Vampires of El Norte, there's also some paranormal, creepy monster, sinister stuff happening, not just historical sinister stuff happening. And she is actually attacked by one of these vampires as a child, and she's with her best friend whose name is Nestor, who is the son of a vaquero. So they're not in the same social class, but they're allowed to play with one another as children. And then they're kind of just starting to get to that point of they're like 13 or so. So it's starting to be like she has to become this wealthy young woman, that gets married off to another ranch owner's son. And he has to become a vaquero and like work the land. And that's their social positions in this world. But because she's attacked by a vampire, he brings her back to the house and everyone's like, she's dead. And he knows that he's going to be blamed for it. He's already devastated. So he runs away and actually starts working as a vaquero all over, going from job to job. And wandering aimlessly because he doesn't really have a purpose in life anymore because Nana is no longer alive. But he gets called back to the rancho when the Mexican-American War starts, as they're looking for able-bodied young men to fight on behalf of Mexico. There's horror, romance, historical fiction, all kind of packaged up into one little box for you. That's what I read for a long time ago.
I also kind of leaned into not horror, but the fantasy aspects. So historical fiction, but like definitely fiction because there's magic instead of, just like a novelization of like real times. So I read The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, I think. We'll say that's right. And this is also the first book in a series. So I keep doing this to myself. But then after reading this one, spoilers, didn't love it. So I probably won't read the rest of the series. But this is set in 1889 Paris. And it's about a group of friends who like form this, I don't know how to describe it. They're friends. They like are working together, colleagues, I don't know, to find these like ancient magical artifacts. So there's a lot of word puzzles and things that are on the page so you can see them like as the group is solving them. But then the author was like, well, I want to have these puzzles in the book, so I guess I need to make up a story for the people to solve the puzzles. And it just seemed like it didn't really go together, I guess. I didn't love it. So I don't really remember much of it. I do remember the main character's name is Severon because I listened to the audiobook. So all of their French sounding names I learned how to pronounce from the audio. But I also had a print copy of the book. So I did see, like when I mentioned the puzzles are on the page, I did see that because they don't really describe it well in the audio either. It was fine. I didn't love it. I also don't really love historical fiction. So, but the fact that it was like set in the olden times, I think was more just so they like didn't have technology, but they had magic. So they like could still record with like these fancy pins they had on their clothes that were magic. Why not just set it now when all of this technology exists and then it doesn't have to be magic? I don't know.
It reminds me a little bit of like a Dan Brown book, like the Da Vinci Code and stuff, where there's like all these puzzles and they're going around trying to solve the puzzles to solve the mystery or whatever.
Yeah.
But you might say to me about this book, Sarah, don't read this.
Yeah.
And that's funny because September's theme was don't read this.
Great transition. I liked that one.
I think that was my best yet. And so you could interpret this however you wanted it to, whether it was something that a friend of yours actually said, like, don't read this, or whether it's a cultural institution telling you not to read something. So I went with, let's look at the banned and challenged book lists and find a book that people all over the country have been telling people not to read. And so I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and it was published in 2017. And so in the 6 years since it's been published, it's been on the top 10 list for banned and challenged books for 4 of the 6 years. So people really don't want you to read The Hate You Give. It gets a lot of bad rap for being kind of anti-police, which is interesting because her uncle is actually a police detective, and they talk about he's a good cop. He, is working to help people. And so it's not anti-police. It's anti-people using power to suppress people, or it's anti-people misusing their power, or anti-people being scared of people because they're a certain race. That's why people don't want you to read it. It also has some language, some drug use, some sexual content, the trifecta of why things are like rated bad. You're cursing, you're using drugs, you're having sex, the world is ending. But it focuses on 16-year-old Star Carter, a student at a predominantly white private school. And she's a different star at school than she is when she goes home to work at her dad's small grocery store in the neighborhood where she's grown up. And neither one of those people is 100% who she is, but she can't really be 100% who she is. But she is back in her neighborhood at a party that her brother's sister has dragged her to, because she has an older brother who has the same dad as her, but a different mom. And so his mom's kid, she drags her to a party. She meets up with a guy that she used to be really good friends with when they were kids. And he offers to give her a ride home when things get kind of turned south at the party. And as they are driving home, they get pulled over by an officer who then shoots. Khalil is the boy's name. And you deal with Star kind of coming to terms with being this witness of this violence, of what she wants to do and say publicly about that. But also Khalil's death has become kind of a national thing, on par with the deaths of many Black men across the United States. And so she feels like a pull to do something and to say something. But also, while she's watching Khalil's name kind of get dragged through the dirt of, well, he was just a drug dealer. He probably had a gun on him, and it's like the gun actually turns out to be a hairbrush that was in the car door. She has to figure out who she is and what she wants to use her voice for in a really precarious situation. The title, The Hate You Give, is based on a Tupac Shakur, I guess, philosophy maybe, where he says thug life stands for the hate you give little infants, F's everybody. It's Tupac, so he didn't say F's, but we don't want to click the explicit content button, so I'll just say F's. But basically, you have these children who are born into poverty, who don't have the same opportunities that people who are born into middle class and upper class neighborhoods do. And all that does is continue a cycle that F's everybody, right? Like, no one is okay because of this. And it's not because that's who people are, but it's because of these situations that this hate we're perpetuating against children by labeling them at birth. It is something that's, very harmful for our society. So how can we get away from that?
So let's talk about video games.
So both YA novels.
Yeah. I've also read The Hate You Give, and it's great and I recommend it, but it is heavy. And the book I chose that we're going to kind of end our Southside Reads wrap up episode on is about video games. Again, with my kind of theme bending, I took the don't read this from the theme and picked Don't Read the Comments by Eric Smith. So it has don't read in the title. And it's about a young girl who streams herself playing video games. So that's where the video games transition comes back around after I've said, a whole paragraph of things after I first brought up video games. She's a streamer. She's getting kind of famous. She has sponsors. She has people sending her like VR headsets. And she really wants to continue to get views and sponsors so that she can pay for her mom to go to library school.
Aww.
So her mom does work in a library, but she's trying to get her librarian degree. And her daughter really wants to help support her because it's just the two of them. But she's a girl, and she's a girl who's not white. She's of Indian descent. And there's certain people who have issues with her playing video games, mostly because she's a girl, but, race also plays into it. So it's this whole group that will go into the game. They try to blow up her ship because it's a space game. And there's a lot of detail about what's happening in this video game. It's very spacey. So it's the book could have been way shorter if we didn't have all of the descriptions of what the planets look like and all of that. But anyway, can you tell I'm not a gamer? So there's this other group that tries to blow up her ship. And then they take it even further. They hack into her email account and they change all of her passwords. And so she loses, or she is in danger of losing her sponsors. And they dox her. They find out where she lives and they find out where her mom works, and they wait for her mom to leave the library one night and throw eggs at her. So that's the main story, but also we get another perspective of a boy. So there's this kind of sweet romance building too throughout this story, who is a fan of hers, and he like starts hanging out with her in the game. And he also has his own problems at home. Like his mom really wants him to be a doctor, but he wants to be a video game writer, like not a coder, but he wants to write the stories. So it's this whole kind of video game centered story with these other people who are like trying to ruin it and writing mean comments. And her philosophy is don't read the comments, but then it gets to a point where she can't not read the comments. So yeah, nice little young adult story to and some of our more heavy titles in this half of this wrap up. I think it's time for our transition music.
Time to transition. All right, here we go. A double header, extra long, 2-episode wrap up because Southside Reads is amazing and we need to dedicate as much time as possible to it.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to our Southside Reads wrap up. I hope you're just as happy as we are that we're back.
And we'll have lots of fun stuff, I'm sure, in store for you. We don't have quite as direct of a cliffhanger to promise. And we can tell you October Southside Reads theme is mysterious reads.
So there's a good chance there'll probably be more murder.
Yeah. So
we'll just end every episode promising murder in the next episode.
There will be murder.
Talk of murder for anyone listening out of context.
We can't wait to have a great season 2 of Greenwood Gab, share it with you and keep talking to each other and to you.
We also hope you have a great.
Isn't that like a kind of romance?
The May December.
Is it December?
I think it's December.
Oh, okay.
Probably can say May September. So like you're with an older person, but like not that much older.
It's a little bit of an age difference, but it's not like full on Winona Ryder, Richard Gere. There was a movie about that.
Yeah.